Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to talk about X-Men. So, I grew up with the X-Men cartoon from the 90s. I didn't really watch it that much, however. I mostly watched the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. I got a lot of love for that show. So, I only really caught a couple episodes, mostly when they were in the Savage Lands, or at least when Professor X was in the Savage Lands. I'll get to that in a little bit. With the recent resurgence of X-Men through X-Men 97, I decided to take a dip back into it and check out if the series held up, how I liked it, and honestly, if I even wanted to get to X-Men 97. I've heard great things about X-Men 97, so I'm really excited to get to that. But first, we got to get through all five of the first X-Men 90s cartoon seasons. Going into the series, I had some thoughts about it already. I mean, I remembered Wolverine being cool. I remembered Gambit being pretty cool, but I don't remember a lot of him at all. I remember Wolverine. Wolverine always sticks out to me as like the main X-Men, just because I guess he's the coolest. I mean, like, when haven't you done this and like pretending like you had claws coming out? It's cool. But Gambit I also thought was cool, and I remember Scott was, I thought, a Boy Scout type of guy, and everybody else, Jean, I don't even remember Jean, but and she was there, so it just felt weird. I never really saw her that much. But everybody else was kind of a mystery to me, or like rediscovering them. So I was excited to see how the series would go. And this is going to cover the first two seasons of X Men. So if you haven't watched it and you're thinking about watching it, spoiler alert. Getting into it, I thought season one and season two were pretty good. Season one, I thought, was a little bit messier than season two. Season two, it really felt like they figured out how they wanted to do the show and what direction they wanted to go with it and how they wanted to tell the stories that were in it. So it felt much more connected, or the episodic episodes really felt much more plot relevant as opposed to the first season, which wasn't bad at all. It felt like a lot more of character, introducing us to the characters as it should. It's the first season. So it was a lot more of introducing us to the characters, showing us the characters' characteristics by actions they would take throughout the actual episodes that were focused on them. And honestly, I think that's a really good way to introduce your characters to the audience. And I think that it was very effective here because it showed us the morals of the X-Men. It showed us all their different characteristics, what makes them different as X-Men, as people, and really how their whole team dynamic works anyway. So I thought it was actually pretty interesting to see that firsthand, because seeing the X-Men movies, the live action movies, you think it works way differently than it actually does, especially in this show. I mean, like, Wolverine, I don't know why the movies are so focused on Wolverine. Like, he's nowhere near the most important X-Men, it seems like, at all. It also felt like they got a better idea of how to do, like, long running threads through their seasons. So, for instance, in season one, we had the whole Hank McCoy trial going on, Beast. So, we had that trial going on for mutant rights and everything like that, which was kind of like a through line through the whole season and mostly gets resolved near the end of the season. But it felt like season two, they had a much better grasp of how to actually show updates and keep us interested with that. With Professor X and Magneto being stranded in the Savage Lands, it was a much more interesting, much better told way of doing it. And honestly, it kept my attention. I was wondering when they'd get back to it. I thought that it left you wondering a lot more and wanting to see a lot more than it did with the Hank McCoy trial. Which, at the end of the day, how much can you really expect to get from a trial? But honestly, that whole thing about the through threads reminded me about the difference of going from anime once again back to older cartoons, or cartoons in general, and the fact that, yeah, they don't always beat the bad guys when they first fight them. They don't always like have to have inner monologues about right and wrong, although there's a lot of that in X-Men, but about right and wrong and training arcs and all that stuff. Yeah, I forgot that they don't need all that stuff. And it's very refreshing to not have all of that stuff in there. So let me just talk about the characters though, because I said this is very character focused, or if I didn't, it is very character focused. And the characters in here are great. They're all fleshed out. You learn about all of the characters and all their different quirks, all their different strengths and weaknesses. And honestly, it's a wide cast of characters, and I love to see it. So I'm gonna start off with some of the reliable ones: Rogue and Storm. I say these are like two of the most reliable X-Men out there. They always got your back. They're always there when Professor X needs them. They're always doing something that helps the team, and they're never really that much of a burden as others on the team are. It seems like they really are great. Maybe it's because with great power comes great responsibility, to quote another 90's cartoon, but it might be because of that Storm and Rogue are one of the most powerful mutants, and they really have to keep their powers in check. And by doing that, it has allowed them to really become more reliable, know where they're needed, know what they need to do. And I feel like that's just the whole thing about being X-Men and learning how to actually use your powers and be useful to society. Learning what your strengths and weaknesses are, where you know you need to strengthen yourself so that you can overcome different obstacles. And that's what both of these individuals have done. Rogue knows that she can't touch people, but she uses her powers and what she has to help the X-Men. And Storm knows that she needs to keep her emotions in check, but she does all that she can, as much as she can, all the time, and always really pulls through. Unless, like, there's some BS or somebody's super strong. But just really, really, really nice to see. And I was actually surprised because I thought like Cyclops would be the most reliable one, to be honest. And he's pretty reliable, but he let's get into it now. Him and Jean, Scott and Jean, Cyclops and Jean Grey, they, especially the first season, they're just as absent as Beast Trial because they're always in the courtroom. You barely see them. Like Scott barely goes out on missions. I would say for season one, it was great at introducing us to characters, but we could have seen more of Cyclops and Jean Grey, and it would have hit more to see when Professor X isn't there in season two, how the dynamics work, because we would have known them better. And I feel like season one, you see Scott more than Jean. You see Scott and you see Jean, but they're definitely there much less than the other X-Men. And you kind of feel that in the show. I felt that, at least. I feel like Scott and Jean need to be around more to have a better connection for the show and their characters, because I don't feel like you know them as well. Scott is definitely like a Boy Scout-ish character still, whatever Wolverine calls him. And he's just very by the book for the most part, unless it comes to stuff he really, really cares about. And it's like, I can appreciate, like, Scott had some cool moments in season one. Like, I remember when Morph died, they were gonna go back. It's like he has this talk with Wolverine, and he's like, I know we couldn't stay then, but it's like, yo, let's go get back now. And I'm like, okay, Scott, that's cool. But he doesn't have a lot of those moments, and it feels like the Boy Scout moments outweigh a lot of the cooler moments. And I don't know why. I've heard he's a cool character. People try to tell me. After these first two seasons, I still seen Boy Scout. But it's very cool. He still has cool powers. He's cool when he needs to be cool. That's the thing about him. He's cool when he needs to be cool. Jean, on the other hand, I don't remember what she did in season 1 or 2. But she's there. She just always was Scott, and then she's always... she never goes on missions because she's always dealing with Cerebro, or she's talking to Scott. It's just not... she's just not there, really, in the field that often. Not much to talk about with Jean. Beast, though. Beast is a great character. He's definitely a breath of fresh air, and once he got out of the trial, after the whole season 1 incidents and everything, with gaining mutant rights and being set free, he was a breath of fresh air that I didn't realize I needed in the show, because he just brings a lot more. He brings a different type of comedy to the show, like a witty sense of comedy that it really feels lighthearted and like fun. And like there's other characters that kind of have that, but it's like they got that edge to it. Beast is just really playful with how he does it, and it's just really fun to see a character like that in this show with such serious topics all the time being discussed. To see somebody who, even though they're having to go through the same issues, is definitely looking at it in a much more positive and optimistic light. And Beast is just a great character, honestly. I love that he fights using his brain. I mean, he doesn't really have much else other than his brain. I mean, and the like super muscles, or I don't actually know what his power is. Like, if I had to say, he's a beast, but he is a beast for real. He's like, he can do like everything, and it's very cool. He just can't shoot like super. Okay, in a superpower world, he can't do everything, but you get what I mean. He can do everything like a human can, but better, and he's blue. It's like a taller Sonic the Hedgehog, but without split. He's not like Sonic. Never mind. Scrap that. Oh, and now for Professor X. Professor X. He's something. He's like I don't know. Professor X is really confusing because he's definitely like the general of the group. He leads them. He's like their father. He's some of their father figures. He's some of their psychiatrists, like Wolverine, for instance. But he's like Scott's dad, basically. So it's like they all have kind of different dynamics with him, and you can definitely see that with how they interact with him. With Wolverine, it's definitely much more of a like talking to somebody you know, as opposed to Scott, where it's like talking to like an elderly or father figure. So, like, there's levels to it, and you can see that. And Professor X really confused me the first two seasons because I thought he'd have a lot more to like say and kind of teach, just from what I knew about the X-Men. But he's barely in the show, it seems like, at least for the first season. For the second season, however, him and Magneto are stuck in the Savage Lands, and you get pretty frequent cuts at the end of episodes to what they're doing there, which I loved, honestly. It was a great way to build up something for the later part of the season, and then also just kind of show us what Xavier's capable of, because unlike the other X-Men, we didn't really get an intro episode to him, because he doesn't really go out in the field, because I mean, he's in a wheelchair, but he doesn't really go out that much. So it's always a pleasure when he does go out, because he always actually does do something, like you read somebody's mind. But let me get into that, actually. This man says at one point in the show, I only go into people's minds who consent to it. And then proceeds to go through like everybody's mind in the show that is a problem. Why would you say that if you're gonna do that in like the next episode anyway? It's like he has rules, but it's like, you know the saying, sometimes rules need to be broken. And this man, he's pretty lenient with his rules sometimes. Like he switches his decisions kind of quickly, which I'm not saying is a bad thing as a leader, but it's just funny to watch as a show, especially when we don't have a better grasp of Xavier as a character as of yet. But honestly, watching him in season 2 with Magneto is great, because that's where we really get a lot of the Xavier meat and potatoes of it, the real stuff that makes Xavier Xavier. Putting his ideals against Magneto's is a great compare and contrast for what they value, how they actually respect one another, how they respect mutants, how they respect humans, and showing all of that stuff and their reasons why to a degree. Another thing that this show does kind of well is flashbacks. The flashbacks are always pretty quick, but they get the point across, and you're able to understand why these people came to this conclusion most of the time, and it's cool. Whereas I'm used to manga and anime flashbacks that take forever. But they're still good. Another reason I like the X-Men is because of the themes and topics they tackle, so discrimination and acceptance and rejection and love and everything, interracial, interspecies, all of that stuff. And it's just very interesting to see The X-Men is another case of showing how everybody is not always bad, or certain people's not always good or bad, and how we have to judge people based on what they do and not exactly how they look like or who they know necessarily. It's more about how they act as a person, and the X-Men is a great metaphor for that. Speaking of which, the whole X-Men as a whole, when Stan Lee created them, was based on the actual civil rights movement. It was a metaphor for the civil rights movement. And it's very easy to see that, especially with trials like Hank McCoy, which, honestly, thinking back on it, shows exactly what the civil rights movement was kind of like. The X-Men go about it more non-violently, similar to Martin Luther King, with not necessarily protests, but the fact that Beast even gets caught and decides to go through the court system to show that mutants aren't always trying to break free, that they do want due process and all of that stuff. And whereas people like Magneto, who totally reject humans and feel like they don't accept them so that they might as well be gone, is another philosophy in what happens with some people when they are rejected from a group. And it's just very interesting and very mature to see cartoons handled in this way. I feel like shows like this are a great example of how we should teach our kids that not everybody's bad, and you should really get to know people by what they do and their actions. Don't judge a book by its cover, judge it by the contents it holds. And I really think that this is a great lesson that X-Men can teach everybody. It also shows how no matter what your walks of life, that you can change with a lot of work and a lot of commitment to wanting to change. I mean, Wolverine is somebody who makes this very clear. He clearly has a troubled past, but by working with Xavier and accepting people like that, X-Men, to help him, he's able to actually become like a better person. And we see that everybody he faces, whether it be Sabretooth, Omega Red, they all say the same thing about Wolverine. He's changed. And that's very important to see, like to show that people can change, to show that people are possible of change. And that's just something that we don't emphasize as much anymore. Maybe it's because of the internet, but it'd be nice to get back to a time like that and show how people can change. Really, this series has just been getting better and better, and I'm very excited to see where it goes. Right now, I'm in the end of season 3, I think. I haven't looked at how many episodes there are, but I'm excited to see where the season goes. I still got 2.5 or 2.25 more seasons left. I'm very excited. Hopefully, I'll get to X-Men 97 pretty soon, and yeah, but until then, tell me what you guys think of the old X-Men 90s cartoons, or any of the old 90s cartoons, now that I think about it. And let me know how you like the video, if you want more of this type of stuff, if you want me to cover a different cartoon, different anime. Let me know, leave it in the comments, leave a like, and share out the video. And see you later. Peace.